And hello and welcome back. This is our second session of the tongue mudra instruction. And last week we had our first session in which participants went through the learning stages of the tongue mudra and learned some of the more advanced nuances of that technique for clearing the mind and centering. And this week we're going to do another teaching session. I'm going to add some material and also talk a bit about the gold key release and other tetraseed transformation procedures and their relation to the tongue mudra. And I will allow for feedback, time permitting. So first, a bit of introduction. Once again, on the tongue mudra, this is an evolved form of an ancient yogic technique. It's evolved by virtue of the heightened potency of this formulation. And the tongue mudra, being a centering technique, involves the core of us, and not just the physical, physiological core, but also the core in terms of our baseline of awareness. So the tongue mudra can be taught in 6 stages, and that's what I'll be doing today. I'll be doing some preparatory teaching, and then we'll proceed through the basic learning to some of the more advanced techniques of the tongue mudra. One of the things that we'll be adding today is a technique called the diamond penetration rhythms. And that will fit into the third section of teaching as a way of making that technique even more potent. So let's begin here. First thing we're going to do is a practice that I call the sage breath, S-A-G-E. The sage breath is an instruction that enables you to use your tongue well in the tongue mudra. And it has other effects, which include improvement of breathing capacity, straightening of posture, and relief of tensions found in the trunk. And it doesn't matter what your unique pattern of tension is, the technique will allow you to discover it and to progressively release it. So to do the sage breath, you bring the flat of your tongue up to your palate. And for learning purposes right now, as you bring your tongue up, notice whether you're equally snug from the tip of the tongue through the back of the tongue, or whether parts of your tongue touch and others don't. As we do the sage breath, you'll be cultivating a more complete contact of your tongue with the roof of your mouth. So do that now. Bring the flat of your tongue up to the roof of your mouth. You'll feel the tip of your tongue fit snugly behind your front upper teeth. And you'll notice if you have contact of the back of your tongue, that it contacts behind the upper rear molars. So now with that snug contact, gently slide your tongue slightly forward and backward. And one thing that will do is awaken sensation through your palate, the roof of your mouth, which is essential for doing the tongue mudra. So do that now. Bring your tongue up. Gently is sufficient. And do a small rubbing movement forward and back with your tongue. Do that now for a time. So now your palate, your roof of your mouth is sensing the rubbing of your tongue. Okay, and rest for a moment. Now, in our next step, we're going to be doing a movement just of the tongue, lifting up against the roof of your mouth, your palate, and then while keeping the tip of your tongue in contact, lower the rest of your tongue to create a hollow in your mouth. And a small movement is sufficient. So do that now. Separate all but the tip of your tongue from the roof of your mouth. Feel the space between your tongue and the roof of your mouth. And then bring your tongue back up and gently press. Make your tongue snug. And do that for a time. And complete what you're doing. Okay. Now, in our next step, we're going to synchronize tongue movement with the movements of breathing. And it goes like this. As you make your tongue snug against your palate, you exhale. And as you peel your tongue away from the roof of your mouth, you inhale. And again, it's fine to start with small movements and no need to exaggerate your breathing movements. Just an easy, gentle movement. Inhalation, exhalation. To do that now, as you exhale, bring your tongue snugly against the roof of your mouth. And as you inhale, drop your tongue away from your mouth. Your mouth stays closed. You're just doing a movement of the tongue. So you bring your tongue up as you exhale and bring your tongue away from the roof of your mouth as you inhale. And notice how the movements of the tongue aid the movements of breathing. When you make more space in your mouth and nasal passage, dropping your tongue, you'll notice that you create more space also in your chest and abdomen with breathing. And continue that for a time. If you get lightheaded, you may be hyperventilating, efforting too much in your breathing. So let your breathing be softer. And notice that bringing your tongue up against the roof of your mouth acts something like a bellows in helping drive the air out through your mouth and nasal cavity. Bringing the tongue up is like a bellows pushing out. Drawing your tongue down is like a bellows drawing air in. Now, as you bring your tongue up, notice that the back of your tongue meets the upper rear molars. And with your tongue, you can feel the edges of your back teeth and the space behind. So as you exhale, fit your tongue more snugly into the space behind. Okay. And this next step now, we go into the tongue mudra proper, and I'll coach you through that. As you bring your tongue up to the space behind your upper teeth, there's a certain amount of pressure between your tongue and that space. Just notice how much that is. And bring the tip of your tongue up with the same amount of pressure to the roof of the mouth behind the upper front teeth. So you balance 3 points, 2 in the back, 1 in the front. And now decrease the amount of pressure. Again, all 3 points balanced. And now just maintain those 3 points as you breathe, so you're no longer lifting and lowering your tongue. Now, with those 3 points in contact, you can now sense your palate from back to front. And continue to breathe freely. Your tongue stays in contact. Now, maintaining that contact, bring your tongue down slightly into the shape of a spoon, so the hollow faces upward with 3 points still in contact. Go slowly, and you'll notice at a certain point that you feel your palate get sensitized. It turns on. And if you drop your tongue a little farther, you'll find that the sensation goes from the palate, which is the roof of the mouth, but the floor of the nose, turn on, and sensation in the nasal passage, turn on in a place that connects with the place in your palate that has turned on. So just maintain that teaspoon cupped tongue position with 3 points in contact, 2 behind the upper rear teeth, 1 behind the upper front teeth. Your tongue is cupped, enough for your palate to turn on. Too much, you may lose it altogether. Too little, you'll never have created the sensation. That's why go slowly until you locate the amount of cup that turns on your palate, and a little more cup that turns on your nasal cavity, causes your nasal passages to dilate, to expand a bit. And once you can feel that location in your nasal passage, breathe across and through that location to stimulate further. Cooling as you inhale, warming as you exhale. You continue until that sensation gets a bit more vivid. And now close your eyes and gaze into the place where you feel that sensation in your nasal passage. If you lose it from your mind's eye, go back to breathing across that location until it turns on again and you can feel it easily. Then gaze at it. And now, gazing at it, gaze through it and past it. You'll feel your eyes relax in a certain way as you gaze past. And return again to gazing at that place in your nasal passage as you breathe. And then allow your gaze to go through and past that location. And alternate. Wait for your attention to steady at each position before switching. You may notice sensations other than the nasal passage all of a sudden. You might feel the urge to change your posture. You may feel sensations down your spine, perhaps behind the heart region or in the back of the neck. And you may feel and hear crunching sounds as you make spontaneous postural adjustments. Those are harmless. They're just a sign of subtle repositionings of the bones of your head and spine as you come more free. Okay, let's pause for a moment. So the position of the tongue behind the upper front teeth and the rear upper molars, cupped so that you feel the sensation in your palate and nasal passage, is the tongue mudra. The gazing into the nasal passage and through that place and out is a more advanced form of the tongue mudra, and with practice, if not already, you will feel or have felt spontaneous changes of posture occurring, including perhaps, and more likely, further dilation of your nasal passage. The cavity, not in your nostrils of your nose, but above the roof of your mouth, that constitutes the deep nasal cavity behind your face. That cavity ends at the back of the throat behind the nose. That's the upper ending. The lower ending is the end of the soft palate. So I'm now going to guide you through aiming, A-I-M-I-N-G. And by aiming, I mean that you can focus the sensation that you've located in your palate and nasal passage forward, up, and back in different directions by adjusting where you put your attention and the amount of curl or cup in your tongue. So once again, we go into tongue mudra. Now you know how to do it. Take that position, that shape. And put your attention on the roof of your mouth and experiment with cupping your tongue more and less until you feel the amount and the angle of your tongue that gets you to feel that place just above the upper front teeth. Or the bottom of your nose, is. Breathe across that place. Feel it cool, inhaling, warm, exhaling. Continue now. And now gaze into that place. And now gaze through it and past it. Let your eyes relax. And alternate a couple of times. And complete what you're doing. Now we're going to aim further up. We're going to aim toward the bridge of the nose and the place between the eyes. And again, you locate that place by putting your attention there and then cupping your tongue more and less until you feel the amount that awakens that location in you. So, tongue touching in the space between the upper rear teeth and secured there, and the tip of the tongue with equal pressure behind and above the upper front teeth. Less pressure works better than more pressure. Notice that you can direct the breath so that you feel that location. Once you've turned it on, gaze in your mind's eye at it. When it's turned on, gaze through it and past it. When you feel a change of sensation occur, gaze again into that place. And alternate. Okay. And complete what you're doing. Our next location is the nasal septum. The septum is what separates the right and left nostrils from each other. And the septum goes deep into the head. It's not just in the visible part of the nose, it actually goes to the part behind the face. So as you do the tongue mudra, put your attention into the nasal passage and adjust the cupping of your tongue until you feel the center line of your nose turn on. And again, experiment with how much tongue cupping you do to feel that place. And breathe across it and through it. And when it turns on enough, gaze into it, and then through and past it. Stay at each position long enough for your attention to steady before switching. You may notice that your soft palate responds. Allow your nasal passage to dilate, to get more open. Notice that if that affects your head position. And complete what you're doing. Our next location is the ceiling of the nose, the roof of the nose. Now, the roof of the nose is a bone that lies at the base of the brain cavity. It's called the ethmoid bone. And the ethmoid bone has two little hollows into which fit the pituitary gland and the famous pineal gland. Now, much has been said and written about the esoteric significance of the pineal gland in terms of spiritual development and clairvoyance. What I can attest to is that turning on that location, as we're about to do, produces a feeling of deep equilibrium or balance and the ability to let go of both mind and body. Which, strictly speaking, are the same thing. They're just two different names for different kinds of sensations. What you do then is put your attention in the highest part of your nose, and again, cup and aim the hollow of your tongue like a radio dish toward the roof of your nose. When it turns on enough to feel, breathe into and across it. You're really just breathing sensation. We know that air isn't going through it, but sensation is. And now in a slow, subtle movement, bring your chin up and feel where you feel the sensation in that region, and bring your tongue down. You'll notice that the sensation moves forward and back as your chin comes up and goes down. There will be a most sensitive location. And continue to move your head until you feel that most sensitive location and put yourself there so the sensation stabilizes at that most sensitive location. You'll find that it's also a balance location for your head. And breathe through that place with your head in that position. And now gaze into that place in your mind's eye. And now gaze through and past it. And alternate between gazing into it, gazing through and past it. You may notice a sensation turn on at the crown of your head, forward of center. Breathe through that place. Notice what else in you, in your trunk perhaps, that wants to open and relax. Let it be so. And complete what you're doing. Now we're going to aim further back. We're going to put our attention at the back of the nasal cavity, front of the throat behind your nose. You'll notice that there are two openings, one for each nostril. Cup your tongue to locate it. And then breathe across and through it. And gaze into it. Gaze into the sensation. And then gaze through it and past it. And alternate gazing at it with gazing through and past it. You may feel sensations now in your upper neck at the base of your head. You may feel a spontaneous urge to adjust in certain ways, and you may hear and feel crunchings as you do so. And complete what you're doing. Now, by cupping your tongue very deeply, you can reach the place of your upper back behind the heart region. And you've been practicing these sequences, so now you know it sufficiently. Do what it takes to turn on, feel, and breathe through that location behind the heart region. If you can't find it, if you can't reach it, don't be concerned. This practice takes practice. So if you're feeling it, very good. If you're not, do the practice. It'll turn on. Do it in your own time, in your own place, and you'll find these sensations increasing, clarifying, and the changes that result happening more quickly and larger, up to a point, the point being when the essential corrections have taken place, it's done. So you won't be experiencing the same thing later on. Okay, let's complete that. I will tell you from my own experience that those sensations may go all the way to the sacrum. That's the back center bone below the waistline of your pelvis. In addition, many other physical changes may occur according to what you happen to need. Unexpected relaxations in places you didn't know were tense, openings, things like a leg getting longer, ribs changing position and crunching. All of these things are beneficial changes, essentially gentle. They should be entirely comfortable. I have never experienced an uncomfortable change occur. Just to let you know what may be in store and that I've accounted for the possibility. And I say likelihood. Okay. So let's move on to the next practice, which I call the floating palate. And it builds upon the same tongue mudra, 3 points in contact, gently, and the sage breath, which is the lifting and lowering of your tongue. In this case, with the floating palate, the lifting and lowering is very subtle. So there's no pressing against the palate. It's the cupped form of your tongue, gently rising and falling in a wave-like manner. And you start with whatever amount of control you have, and then become increasingly gentle with your tongue. Just keep going gently, more and more gently, until you feel your palate respond. Gently rising as your tongue rises, gently falling as your tongue falls. There's a sweet spot for that. Too much tongue movement, you won't feel it. Too little, you won't get it to happen. So you start at whatever level of effort you're using in your tongue and decrease until you feel your palate respond. So do that now. Still in contact at 3 points. As your palate floats lower, you may feel a kind of suction sensation in the rest of your head, a kind of urging of other bones of your head to move. For example, the occiput, which is the name of the bone at the underside back of your head, the nasal septum, the roof of the nose, and even the crown of the head. When you feel that sensation of suction, slow down just a little bit to help that place that wants to move. It works better by going slower until you understand from experience how this all works, at which point you can adjust freely how much lift and lower and how fast. In the beginning, we're doing it slowly and gently so that you make your first connection. Now gaze at your palate as your palate rises and falls, and breathe across your palate. Your breath may have subsided quite a bit. That's sufficient. A very gentle breath is sufficient to breathe across your palate. Okay, complete what you're doing. I'm going to teach you now one of the more advanced techniques that comes from what I call the diamond penetration technique, which is an advanced technique of somatic training that takes things much more deeply, much more quickly. And you'll see what I mean in a moment. The diamond penetration technique involves rhythms of movement. And by rhythms, I mean something like this: up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. So there were rhythms with a pause in between, and the rhythms had a pattern. So for the floating palette, it's convenient to do this pattern. You're going to do just what I showed you: up, down, up, pause, down, up, down, pause. Slower even than that. Up, down, up, pause, feel, and make a memory of that sensation. Then down, up, down, pause, feel, and make a memory of that sensation. The next time you do the up direction, during the pause, deliberately remember the sensation and notice if it's in the same location as your memory. Note the sensation. Notice if it's in the same location as your memory of it. If it isn't, correct your memory. Then do down, up, down. Feel the sensation and compare it to your memory. There'll be another rhythm after this, just letting you know. So I'm going to give us time to practice this and then teach you the next rhythm. So do that now. We do the floating palate technique. Your tongue floats up with your palate, floating with your tongue, down, up. Make a memory of that sensation. Down, up, down. Make a memory of that sensation. And then continue comparing the actual sensation to the memory. Do that now. And complete what you're doing. To teach you the second rhythm, I need to make something distinct about the first rhythm, which is the rhythm was up, down, up, pause, down, up, down, pause. The second rhythm is up, down, up, pause, pause, down, up, down, pause, pause, up, down, up, pause, pause, down, up, down, pause, pause. So in the second version, there's the same amount of time remembering and comparing the sensation as in creating it. In the first version, twice as much time to do up, down, up than there was remembering and comparing the pause to the movement. So the second version, you'll be doing 2 beats of pause to match the 2 beats of the movement of the tongue. So I'll pace it out for you at the beginning and leave you to your own devices for a time while you practice. So with your tongue in the tongue mudra, 3 points gently in contact. Remember, gentle works better than firm pressure. Gently lift your tongue up, down, up, pause, pause, down, up, down, pause, pause, up, down, up, pause, pause, by yourself now. Now switch to the first rhythm. Up, down, up, pause, down, up, down, pause, and continue. And switch to the second rhythm. And gaze at your palate. Breathe across and through that place you feel in your palate and nasal cavity. And complete what you're doing. So that was the floating palate technique with diamond penetration rhythms. Now, there is an entire entry and a course coming on the diamond penetration rhythms, which will be announced in due course. For now, let's move to the next technique, which I call the bite your tongue technique. Now it goes like this. Rather than bringing your tongue up to the space behind your rear upper molars, you gently nip the sides of the back of your tongue between your upper and lower rear molars. It's easiest to start just with one side. So you gently move your tongue over to one side and just gently nibble with the rear molars on the back side of your tongue. Experiment with more and less nibble until you can do it very gently. Gently works better. Notice if you're really getting the rear molars or whether you're using teeth more forward of that. Aim for the rear molars. And now switch sides. And switch sides. You may notice your lower jaw shifts to help find the position. Just the edge of your tongue. Your tongue doesn't need to be deep between those teeth. The edge is sufficient. And then switch sides again. Notice your lower jaw shifts. Your head may also tilt. Okay. Complete what you're doing for the moment. So our next action is to get both sides simultaneously. This is likely to take a little bit of practice. If you have the basic intention in place, as you alternate side to side, you'll be able to get both sides of your tongue at the same time. So let's do it this way. You nip one side, and as you nip, you'll feel a pressure go through the teeth, your upper teeth, up into the rest of your head. Do that now. Once you've got that side, find the same thing on the other side. You may notice it go all the way to the inside of the crown of your head. Switch sides. And as you switch, feel the location and the inner crown of your head drift from side to side. Cause yourself to drift from side to side there. Do that now. As you switch, the drifting occurs. You may also feel it in the roof of your mouth. Gradually decrease the amount of movement until you can locate the center. Breathe through that center. gaze at and past that center. Notice that your eyes relax in a peculiar way, and you may feel even places in your trunk relax. Alternate between gazing at that place and through and past it. And complete what you're doing. Now we're going to assemble everything we've done so far. First, I'll describe. So you enter into tongue mudra with 3 points in contact gently. Then you switch to the bite your tongue technique. You now have 2 points. You balance the right and left sides. Once you've balanced the right and left sides, you cup your tongue enough to feel a sensation in your palate that goes into your nasal passage. And once you've found that sensation, you gradually touch the tip of your tongue at such a position that it does not disturb but leaves in place that sensation in your palate and nasal passage. Okay, so I've just described it. That's getting into the position. Once you've done that, then you're free to do floating palate. And in due course, I'll give you yet another technique that integrates into this combination. So you do that now, you get into tongue mudra. Now switch to the bite your tongue technique, 2 points. Alternate left and right until you find center. Cup your tongue and turn on your palate and nasal passage. Keep that sensation in your nasal passage as you bring the tip of your tongue into position. If you lose the sensation, you've missed the position. So go back, find the sensation, and keeping your attention in it, move your tongue into position so that you can still feel that sensation. And gradually do floating palate. Breathe across, gaze into and through. Continue to lift and lower your tongue. When sufficiently practiced, you can do the diamond penetration rhythm. Up, down, pause, down, pause. You may just do the simple form for now. Notice as your tongue rises and falls that your lower jaw wants to rise and fall also. Help your lower jaw rise and fall with your tongue, keeping the sensation in your palate and nasal passage. You will need to slow down for this, maybe to half speed. Gently use the jaw movement to bite your tongue and press upward through the upper teeth into the cranium, and lowering your lower jaw to draw the bones of the head into a more open, released position. Too fast, it won't happen, or it will happen only partially. Keep slowing down until you can get a large movement to occur. It's like a suction feeling as you lower your tongue and jaw. Gaze at the place you feel moving. Gaze through and past it. Relax any eye strain as you gaze past. And you can aim in any location in your cranium, and by this means cause yourself to open and dilate so you can actually kind of clean out the inside of your head. By aiming into different places. Okay, complete what you're doing. And the last move I will teach you, I call the cranium float. Cranium is the medical $10 word for head, as opposed to the jaw or mandible. And in this case, instead of a movement that people find more familiar of moving the lower jaw and leaving the cranium, the head, in place, we do the reverse. We keep the lower jaw in its place and move the cranium. So your lower teeth are staying in effect in their own position. Your upper teeth are moving, in this case, forward and backward. It's in a way similar to the sage breath where the tongue was moving forward and backward, only instead of the tongue and lower jaw doing the moving, it's the cranium and the neck. So the movement is of a head forward and back movement rather than of the jaw forward and back. In the cranium float, we get into the tongue mudra. Breathe across the sensation that turns on. Gaze at it in the mind's eye, and then do a gentle movement of the cranium forward and back while the lower jaw and tongue stay in place. And in place does not mean in place relative to the cranium. That's moving forward and back. The lower jaw is in place relative to the rest of you. And your neck and head are moving forward and back. So do that now. Get into the tongue mudra. And gradually begin the movement of head forward and back. And you'll feel the sensation, the turned on sensation, move backward and forward. By this means, you can scan through yourself and find places that are sticky, that are difficult to move through or difficult to feel. You go after those with a bit more time and attention until they wake up and come free. And do that now for a time. Just play with the cranium float. And put your attention through your cranium as you do the movement, like a searchlight beam. And notice things dissolve and open. Okay, and complete what you're doing. So I've given you a basic explanation and instruction about the tongue mudra, taken you through the learning stages of the tongue mudra and some advanced techniques that enable you to create ongoing changes, far-reaching changes through yourself. I've introduced you to the diamond penetration rhythms. I've given you the first two. There are something like 8 different patterns. As an act of mercy, I have taught you only the first two. Information overload being a consideration, right? So the diamond penetration rhythms and the tongue mudra are 2 of 4 learning processes, 4 educational experiences that constitute what I call a total life transformation learning, which does its best for people in support of other practices. So if you have a meditation practice, the tongue mudra will certainly support deeper meditation faster. If you're doing movement practices, the diamond penetration rhythms will rapidly awaken your sensory awareness and control of movement. Those are 2 of the 4. And I'm going to share for a moment how these all stack up so you can see what I'm getting at here. Okay. So we're right now seeing the relationship of these practices. The gold key release that I've spoken of earlier is one among a number of tetraseed transformation procedures that give a person better control of their own faculties of attention, intention, memory, and imagination or emergence. And when combined with the tongue mudra, changes occur much more quickly, particularly if you're doing a procedure where you feel stuck at the very end or things are changing slowly. The tongue mudra rapidly accelerates the shift to a matter of seconds. I made mention of the diamond penetration rhythms, of which you had a bit of an experience, the tongue mudra, which we taught today, and somatic education exercises. And those exercises, unlike most, are not about strengthening, stretching, or endurance. They're about developing sensory awareness and self-regulation. Self-regulation means you do what you intend to do, don't do what you don't intend to do. By getting proficient in these 4, any practice, any life transformation practice will be enhanced and accelerated. And these procedures also work quite nicely just by themselves, but since they exist at the foundation of all practices, they support, enhance, and accelerate or enlarge upon all other practices. I'm going to put a link to this page over to you. I'll be sending it to you by email so that you can peruse this page, which contains two key articles. One is the likenesses of well-known transformation teachings and the gold key release. And this talks about, again, some well-known transformational procedures. And it shows how they are based on the same foundation as the gold key release. And the second being why spiritual development doesn't stick without exercise. And this harkens back to a certain point made in the Superhuman Operating System course about why exercise is necessary if a person is doing an integral spiritual practice. That term will make sense to people who have done the course. And for those who have not, contact me if you'd like to know more, and I can pass that information over to you. All right, so we're back to that. And finally, a little bitty announcement that in 2 weeks, I'll be offering a series of complimentary preliminary training for the Gold Key Release course. So this is pre-training, and it gives you the necessary basics for moving through that course well and comfortably. Why comfortably? Because the opposite is a person who's feeling a little bit lost or left behind. And I prefer everybody to feel comfortable as we move through. So I'll be offering that preliminary training. You'll find it's valuable, effective in its own right. And then you'll have the option of coming into the Gold Key Release course. And in that course, I'll be teaching you a procedure for getting unstuck in life. Now, I'm going to say a little bit about that. People's dissatisfaction with life has to do, as I can see it, with two major situations. One is that they feel stuck with something, and the other is they feel stuck without it, that they're not getting something or experiencing something that they feel they need or want, stuck without it. And in general, it's because of two things. One is when a person is stuck without something, they're not really fitted to having the thing they want. They're not like, how shall I say this? The shoe doesn't fit, okay? What they're looking for is something in which they themselves have conflict. They have second thoughts. They may have guilt about it. They may feel they don't deserve it. They may feel somehow that it's wrong, but it's somehow right and they should be that way. Internal conflict in general, they're not fitted to it. It's like a person who has no training wanting to be a brain surgeon. Get fitted, learn, train, become competent. Now, the problem is that people don't know how, because their entire personal adaptation is based on memories of experience, on learnings, and intentions they have about life or towards the thing itself that they want, or they aren't able to put and keep their attention on it, or they can't even imagine being that way. In either case, they're stuck in a situation that they're just not prepared for, having what they want. The other side is being stuck with what they don't want. Well, what they're really stuck with, whatever the external circumstances, is their own responses, their own emotional and mental reactions to it that make the thing seem unpleasant. So they're busy resisting something, perhaps, or having some kind of emotional response which is unpleasant. So again, it's whatever the external circumstances may be, it's their internal state that makes them feel stuck. The Gold Key Release enables a person to unstick themselves so that they can prepare themselves for the thing they want, and enables them to dissolve the internal experiences that make undesirable things feel undesirable. And what happens is they open up room in themselves to move and be a new way with far less effort than if they're just trying to affirm themselves into a new condition. Ordinarily, people are both stuck and trying to change. That's one foot on the brake, one foot on the accelerator. Gold key release enables a person to take their foot off the brake, enables them to move forward, and it turns out spontaneously in ways that feel perfectly natural, but are now very different from the way they used to be. It's an odd thing. At once, they feel more like themselves and different. And that's about all I'm going to say on the gold key release for now. There are a number of instructional and explanatory videos up. Again, if you want to know more about this, contact me and I'll direct you accordingly. So we'll be doing the preliminary training in that starting in 2 weeks. That'll be a session just like today's session. And I invite questions. So as a matter of fact, since I'm inviting questions right now, let me invite any ask or tell for you who are on the other end of this event. My being on the camera end and you're being on the viewer and listener end. So anybody who has a comment may come into the on-camera section using the link that I gave you by email, and I'll answer any kind of questions that may come up. I'll allow a little bit of time for that, and then we'll conclude.
Lawrence, can you hear me?
I sure do. I think your volume might be a bit high, though. Getting overloaded.
Maybe I'll just talk a little more quietly.
All right.
My name is Jason. Thank you for doing this. So I've been doing, my question is it seems like that some somatic exercises, which you may have been teaching people already, I'm relatively new to you, would be helpful for me to be able to even be able to do the tongue mudra. I was finding a fair amount of difficulty in keeping especially the back of my tongue, I think you said up and behind the back molars. I couldn't do that. I was actually on the molars themselves. The biting down on the tongue was particularly, I could feel sensation. That seemed I could do that. And so if you have any direction or guidance for, I could probably figure some somatic exercises out for the tongue, but if you know of ones, that would be interesting to me. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who doesn't have a lot of control over their tongue.
That sounds like an almost universal predicament. Think about it. Well, in answer to your question, unless you have bite problems like TMJ dysfunction, practice of the tongue mudra will confer the skill with your tongue that you're talking about wanting. However, for a person who has a bite deviation, they have TMJ dysfunction, there is a program of somatic education exercises to clear that up. It's titled 5 Well-Designed Somatic Education Exercises to Improve Your Bite and Make Your Jaws Comfortable in about 2 weeks. Okay. For most people, just practicing this mudra will develop fairly rapidly, I should think, the sufficient control of the tongue to find those positions. So you just get your closest approximation, undergo the shifts that result, and I expect it'll be for you as it was for me. At the very beginning, I had to be deliberate to get myself into those positions. Don't ask me how I intuited that those positions were there. This stuff comes to me. But I had to be deliberate about it. And to hook it up behind the upper molars, it changes your neck and head position, bringing your head more up on top of your neck instead of forward. And that's part of the problem some people have, is that their head is in a stuck forward position all the time. The TMJ program has exercises to assist in getting the head up. However, for some people, they may require somatic education of their overall posture. They may be stuck in a certain reflex pattern that caves the front end, brings the head forward, and rounds the shoulders. It's called startle reflex. There is a program, and there are individual exercises that address it so a person can come out of it. Again, for those who feel they need that, contact me directly, and I'll point you to the exact programs, because there's no program titled for startle reflex. It's part of existing programs. I'll give you one. One's called the cat stretch exercises. So that deals with startle reflex in a passing way. Again, it's not a concentrated addressing of the startle reflex, but it has exercises toward that. It's a bit outside the scope of the purpose of today's session, which is to teach tongue mudra and introduce the rest of the total life transformation tools. It's mostly to give you something of value, namely the tongue mudra and the diamond penetration rhythms, and to open up curiosity in those who are ready to learn more about the others. How's that for an answer?
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Very good. Any other stalwart individuals who want to come into the live section here? I'll allow a little bit of time for people to put the link that I put into your email message into your browser. You just cut, paste, and hit enter, and it will take you into this section here with your picture next to Jason's and beneath mine.
Lawrence, I'll say one more thing is
Yes.
that I clicked on the Google Hangouts link, and it took me to the YouTube live feed. I had to cut and paste the Google Hangouts link and put it in my browser to get to be the interactive version of it. At least that's what it was in my email.
Oh, well, if it was like that in yours, it was like that in everybody. As I like to say, ain't technology wonderful? You know. Okay, well, if anybody else is in that same predicament, I express my regrets. As far as I knew, everything was square, but I've been known to make a mistake once in a while. I like a saying I heard many, many years ago. It goes like this: I never make mistakes. I thought I did once, but I was wrong. Okay, well, since we have no other company, we'll conclude for today. You've got my email address for further communication, and I will send out an announcement for the upcoming pre-course training in the Gold Key release, and we'll take it from there. I bid you arigato. Arigato gozaimasu.